right, we are live. All right, so I'm here with the always fantastic international trumpet soloist, Alan Vizzutti. Alan, how are you doing?
Very well, thanks. Thanks for that nice intro.
Oh, that's good. Thanks. So, with everything that's going on in the world, with the stay-at-home orders and everything, how are you adapting?
Well, surprisingly, our lives, my wife and I, are not that much different, except that we're spending more time together than we ever have since we've been married 33 years. She says, well, really, we've been married about 16 and a half years.
Yeah.
So I am enjoying the opportunity to write music and the opportunity to do the kind of world recording projects that have popped up. I'm doing some lessons online through I guess you could call it a new company, a site called Aeons, Aeyons, out of Australia. A friend of mine is doing a global thing. So with the combination of those things, and then you have, activities with your spouse, and you have things that need to be done at a house, especially in the spring and summer and those sort of things, basically boils down to kind of enjoying the fact that there's so much time that you can choose what you want to do, and realizing how lucky we are that we're not suffering in a way that puts us on the edge of some kind of, I don't know, financial disaster or something like that, which I know so many people are right on the edge. I feel terrible about that. And wondering about the future, because as you and I kind of mentioned in our little pre-show chat, was what's going to happen next in the arts and audiences getting together and those sort of things. So in general, we are very lucky and quite comfortable at the moment. And we get out and do some physical activity, and and our area is pretty socially conscious of, doing the right thing so we don't get any sicker.
Yeah. People
are cooperative, and there's not a lot of the, this is my right, I need to have a party kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, luckily for us, our governor initiated the Healthy at Work initiative last week, so we're phasing back to work, a couple people at a time, social distancing, and luckily we have, 3 larger shops, so we don't really have to be by other people. But it's.
I feel like you and Peter and your company are really just you're smart people doing the right thing, so you're going to do the right thing, and you want to do the right thing, and you will. One worries about flare-ups because our country's so big and diverse and so many different political, social, economic variations that there will be flare-ups. We just, my wife and I were just talking about when we should, or when we could consider getting on a plane, and it could work out fine right now, but we've been very careful. Excuse me, because she's immune compromised a little bit, so we have to be extra careful.
Totally understand that. So one person asked, describe your typical day for Alan Vizzutti. So when you get up, when do you warm up? When do you practice? What does your day look like?
Well, there have been a lot of variations on a theme, and not only during this crisis pandemic, but also in my life, because every I don't have a routine in terms of when I'm on the road and have a schedule. It's not a routine schedule. So there are all kinds of variations. But basically what I like to do, and have been able to basically pull off here at home, is I do like to play trumpet in the morning. Anywhere from 7 to 9 to whatever, and practice for an hour. Warm up. I've been warming up a little less sometimes just because I've been playing regularly and not have a real demanding situation to look forward to, meaning I'm kind of relaxed about it. Yeah. And I've discovered a couple of things about how well you can do, or how good your chops can feel, and suppleness and things like that, if you play periodically throughout the day and you're not hammering too hard too often. That obvious problem of stiffness. You can be pretty strong and flexible by practicing, I don't know what you'd call minimal, an hour and a half a day, if you practice really wisely. So back to the question. Then I do have several projects going. I am actually having fun making recordings and videos for Instagram, for instance, and writing some things, as I mentioned to you earlier. So I can find ways to entertain myself for sure. And then Laura and I try to spend time together, and we play some together and things like that. So there's no real layout of the day except, we kind of have a dinner hour, and not hour, but region of the day. I like to make dinner, and Laura likes it when I do, so that's kind of regular. And yeah, I can work on a project in the evening also, and we spend some time together in the evening. She teaches and practices, so it's really surprising when you're not scuffling with children or some kind of job that you don't know what to do, how to handle, or you're in a quandary there. It's really surprising how busy you can be without much of a schedule on your calendar.
Right.
I mean, I'm looking forward to getting back to opening the calendar page and having a bunch of bookings, but
yeah,
I'm trying not to worry about it.
Yeah. So you briefly touched on it. So describe your warm up. Has it shifted a little bit since you're not performing on a regular basis, or has it changed at all?
No, it hasn't changed at all. Only in the sense that I do a little less now and then, which I don't really recommend. Warming up 15, 20 minutes, like in the style of the method book, my method book, it's always going to help you. It's never going to hurt you. That isn't to say that if you get up and you play 5, 10 minutes and you feel really great, that you can't move on. You just have to be aware of that. So the only thing that's changed for me warm-up wise, and I really, I reiterate that it's very important. In all my published books, it mentions warm-up or has one in it. I do what's in the method book with a lot of variations. You know, a guy who's been playing well for a lot of years, you're going to go upstairs a little more than a 13-year-old earlier in your warm-up. You know, it can be part of a warm-up if you go up to high F or G lightly to get a touch and to have that psychological thing going. That's all normal and shouldn't be interpreted as something that you have to do or need to do, but this is teaching yourself. So I do variations, but the basic components are what are in the method book. Playing the mouthpiece a little bit, playing some mixed articulations, playing some smooth tones, I call them now, instead of long tones, because I play smoothly as possible, but not super long. Taking the mouthpiece on and off for refreshment, to refresh, refreshment. And then some sliding into some technical based exercises that don't make me stiff, because there are great ones. For instance, in the Clark book, again, in my book too, there are technical exercises that really help your flexibility or help your flow. Let's call it flow. And there are others that just make you stiff if you play through the whole set. Mm-hmm. There are ones in the Clark, if I play through a whole set, that's heavy duty practice for me. I try to do it right, but I realize by the end of this set, I'm going to be stiff and I should take a couple minutes off or more. Because why perpetuate stiffness, which is to me the most important, one of the most important components of playing to manage is how supple you feel. That's fundamental for producing the sound, which is the fundamental for producing everything else.
Yeah, that's good stuff. So when you practice, how do you balance fundamentals and literature? Is it 50-50 or what's the ratio?
Sure, it's more like 98% literature.
Okay.
In my life. That's a bit of an exaggeration because if you did the math on a 20-minute warm-up and 98%, it'd be a pretty long practice.
Right.
But I like to go through some flow studies, which again, when I say that, I'm referring to Clark Technical number 2, Vizzutti's Technical 1 and 2, those kind of things. And then I get right into literature. And I have different levels of literature in terms of not technical demand as much as, again, I haven't come up with a word for this barometer on suppleness and lack of stiffness or stiffness. But when I practice Bach violin sonatas out of the original music, the violin music and transpose it, or play on C or B flat, but I like to play on B flat and transpose also. If I do too much of that, or Vern Reynolds' Etudes, really good book, makes me stiff though, because it's a little more angular and the violin music has no rest in it. And your tendency is to forget to put the mouthpiece down because the music's so beautiful and you're flowing through it. As opposed to a more trumpet-oriented book like, even Charlier, those are demanding and long, but they're so trumpetistic and so beautifully oriented toward trumpet. And then you have many other etude books and things that are easier in the sense of they don't make you stiff as soon, I guess you could put it. That you should be aware of as a player. And when you're starting to feel supple and stiff, that you're not tired. You just practice more wisely. Even take a break or play some low things or then take a break. Pace yourself so that your stiffness is mitigated and managed. But then you can have the flow and the ease of tone production that helps with the range and endurance and all the other things. not to mention write notes because you're flowing.
Right.
I have gotten to the point where I can push myself pretty hard, say for an hour, and by the end of the hour, I'm not sounding that good, but I have just a personal knowledge through repetition of practicing, I don't know, 60,000 hours in my life by now. That, okay, I need to stop here and I won't be stiff or weird when I pick the home up again later today or tomorrow. Or I could push past this point out of ego and pay the price of having a kind of a stiff day or stiff lack of response later.
Right.
And this is what the trumpet players, you need to understand for yourself. It's not in a book. You know, if a book says play this, rest 20 seconds, play this, rest 20 seconds, that's all cool. But if it's not working for you exactly that day or in that design, you got to tweak it a little bit. Nobody can come up with a perfect system for everybody because we're all different and have different equipment. Wow, that was long-winded, sorry.
No, that's okay. You touched on another question someone sent in. So let's just say you're performing and you have to go past where you really want to go that day. You're getting really stiff. Yeah. How do you fix that the next morning, or do you fix it that night so you can perform the next day?
Yeah, I've done both. Well, first of all, when it's happening, let's say it's lack of response, so you fear entrances and slurs in your range and things like that are getting a little scuffly during a recital. Because the components that come in, kind of range comes in, and then the dynamics need to be handled a little bit in that. Don't try to play as soft and don't try to play as loud as you might when you're feeling really good. Always be musical and the audience will not care. You can manage some articulations, for instance. You can even practice making some tonguing, maybe an arpeggio, da, dee, da, 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 dee, da, da, slurred, really smooth, and then tonguing so that you can barely hear it, but you're helping that, you know, when people miss a note and they restart with the tongue, it's because there's that compression where they get the note started with quick air from the tonguing. And using a legato tongue, for instance, when you're under fire, or if you just want to be sure about a passage that has a slur mark over it, but you don't want to slur it, you can play so lightly with the tongue with a D sort of syllable that no one will know the difference. And there's much more confidence. So I kick some of that stuff in. Now, I will definitely warm down if it's not possible at the concert hall or whatever the situation is, because if you have guests or a reception or you're in the lobby afterward or something like that, or you just need to go home with mom and dad. I will, in a hotel, I'll pop in the silent brass mute and play for 15 minutes and warm up things. But I don't bother to do the long phrases and the like Clark number 2 6 times through or something. Just on and off, on and off. And or you could do that the next morning. You have to have a little discipline. Well, it depends on your schedule too. If you have a 6 o'clock airplane, you're not going to do that.
Yeah.
So you're going to run into schedules that don't work for you at all, and some that do. And so I'll just throw out there one more thing. I have done the warm down or try to get flexible, knowing I pushed it too hard during the day in order to play well the next day. In the middle of the night, I had an example once where I was recording the books that are, Vizzutti plays Arbin. It's published by DeHaska and now DeHaska Hal Leonard. It's 8 of the solos from the back of the Arbin book with piano. And I played those in Holland at the studio at the publisher's place on cornet. And the cornet, I didn't have a good mouthpiece and I was scuffling with, because I don't play cornet a lot. I can't play these on anything but a cornet. Are you kidding me? And I did practice them at home. So I came up with just a 5 C or B kind of mouthpiece because I wanted as cornety sound as I could get and still play the notes, you know. Mm-hmm. And the thing about the Arbin stuff is the lyrical things, if you have a little waff in the recording, you know, da, 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 fa, da, dang, take 2, right? Where in a concert, it can be real minor with that microphone right there, right? So yeah. We did 4 solos and then 4 solos because I had to rehearse with the guy over there too in a couple of days. Anyway, the first day I got through fine, but I could feel myself pushing on the mouthpiece. It was getting a little bit rough too. It just took too much energy. I could feel myself getting stiff. So that night, I learned this from a Mel Broyles story, by the way. I got up about every 2 to 3 hours to set my alarm, and I played for 10 minutes, warm-up stuff. And the next morning, it wasn't perfect, but it was a lot better. And I've done that before now a couple of times. when you just, if you really know your own playing, you can tell what it's coming on. But you shouldn't be too paranoid about that. Sorry, I'm rambling, but there's one more
you're
thing.
Fine.
With one more thing, with the silent brass beat and other lesser mutes, always remember, you are not the problem if the high notes above high C, for instance, are a little stuffy, or the low notes are a little sharp. Even the best mutes, and there's some, I think the Yamaha one is really usable in situations like hotels and backstage and things like that. It's not you, because your psychology will go, oh, I can usually play this note. Oh, that's difficult. No, it's not you, it's the mute. So keep that in mind.
Yeah. And so a couple university students sent in a couple questions about your time at Eastman. So when you were in school, how did you maintain a constant practice schedule when you had constant rehearsals or classes?
It was very busy and really exciting, and you just fit it in. The school practice rooms at that time stayed open until 11 o'clock at night. So there were a lot of times when I practiced late. In the beginning time, I had 8 o'clock theory, I think it was. It was always like, oh, freshmen, they have 8 o'clock theory, right? Because it's early for college students, and winter country and walking from the dorm and all that. Oh my gosh. First world problem. But you just managed to fit it in. And then some days you really didn't have much time to practice. And I'll tell you what, these sidebar ideas and memories of examples come to mind. And one of them is the things I learned from that. I was 17 when I went to Eastman, and I learned these things quickly, and I applied a lot of it later when I should have applied it right now. But the thing that I learned was on the trumpet and with trumpet literature, including orchestral excerpts and all that stuff, our body of literature, while difficult because of the instrument we play and tone production and playing correct notes and all that, is not that involved. Yes, you can tell me about the Peter Maxwell Davies or playing the Voltsek opera, whatever it's called, I forget. That thing is a fabulous piece that's really tough. But, if you have to learn the excerpts to the Rite of Spring or Petrushka, it's not like one Chopin piece or one Bach violin concerto or some violin concerto, the Mendelssohn. Our stuff is not as difficult as any of that. So the notion was, I learned to focus on learning a piece. Yes, we get better, and there are things that are difficult. I mean, better with a certain piece as over time, but you can learn to play a piece pretty quickly if you have pretty decent skill. And I'm always baffled by when I had a residency at the University of Washington, and then I had some periodically in other places like North Texas and South Carolina. Where I had students regularly for some period of time. I was baffled by the good students who would come in and play really well through a first movement, say, or first half of a movement, and then they'd stop. Say, okay, wow, talk about that and work on it. Let's go on. Oh, well, I haven't even looked at that yet. Oh, how long have you had the music? Oh, I bought it about 6 months ago. So I'm so curious, and it was so fun to read. I couldn't do that. When I got a new book, I'd just plow through it. I wasn't trying to be perfect, but boy, did it teach me to learn music quickly, which really applied later in the studios of LA. Whereas I suppose some of the trumpet players listening don't know that none of that music is rehearsed in advance. It's all sight read. But you rehearse in the studio, but you move quickly. And all that fabulous music you hear on the movies, even though there's electronic doubling and things mostly now, and especially the older movies with the big orchestral scores, they saw that music the day they walked in and recorded it. So you put that all together and you get this mentality of like, I'll practice for sure and warm up and stuff. I'll go to the rehearsal early enough. But I don't really have time to go through any kind of routine today. That can work great. And then when you do. And you of course must satisfy the demands of if you're in an ensemble or have lessons, you've got to focus on those things, just like you do when you have jobs later, if you ever get jobs. Yeah.
And so when you were finishing at Eastman, School of Music there, what made you decide on a career as a soloist rather than like a symphony orchestra or whatever have you?
I had a bit of a naive notion, I suppose, that I'd like to be a soloist in terms of, I just really enjoyed that whole idea and the whole setting and the whole possibility. It's a bit ego-driven too, but I like the idea I also like the idea of sky's the limit. There's no ceiling to what you can do. And I went to Eastman 6 years, so I went straight into a master's degree because I had a big scholarship, and there was a lot of work in Rochester, New York at the time of all genres. So I was able to support myself right in town. Plus I played in the Rochester Philharmonic, third and assistant first, as a sophomore in college. So I had the school thing and some pro things going, and the Bach Orchestra and some things like that there was abundant activity in Rochester. So by the time I was just about the end of my master's degree, Woody Herman asked me to go on the road. He's a big band leader, Woody Herman's Thundering Herd, who was in his, he was just coming up on his 40th anniversary, and he started in 1936, and his band, which was a true jazz band, it wasn't a commercial band, traveled past his 50th anniversary. I remember the 40th because we did a live concert recording with alumni at Carnegie Hall. But anyway, he had asked me to go before, and it was in middle school, so I decided to finish my degree. It was kind of a no-brainer in the sense of, it was all on I was busy, I was paying for everything was fine, and the activity was pretty fun, most of it. Plus there were gigs that weren't, but paid okay. I was doing that too. And then I took auditions. I almost made it in, I was in the finals for Boston way back when Ralph Schmedvik got the gig. Then I did a couple others without much result. I mean, I went and did Cincinnati and Chicago. I forget what chair that was, but it was really incredible experience and not that fun, but incredible process. And then I won a position in San Antonio Symphony, which was a really good orchestra. I ended up playing as a soloist with them later. They're gone now, finances. And I had an opportunity to go to Israel and play in the Israel Philharmonic. Just came up. Mostly that was word of mouth, and it probably would have been a, what do they call that? You know, probationary year or something like that. You know how they do that? Because they don't want someone stuck in there if they're not really working out.
Right.
Although that's from the player audition standpoint, that's nasty, but it's true. So anyway, I had this choice, San Antonio, and I got a call from Woody Herman. And I thought, I really love orchestra music. It's my favorite genre of writing too. Of all, if I had to do one more piece, I'd write an orchestra piece. And I'd also had, besides the school experience, which, you know, was good playing Mahler 5 and stuff like that, I also was experiencing sitting in the back, counting the rests, playing Haydn, Mozart, fabulous music, but for the trumpet players, you know, but if you miss a note, then, how can you miss a note? We have all these notes, you have one note, that kind of thing. And I decided to go on the road. So that's what led to that. Then Woody Herman met Chick Corea, and Chick Corea wrote a piece for Woody Herman, which we recorded. And then one of my pals from Eastman, who's a year or two older, Jim Pugh, trombone artist and teaches in Illinois. Now he was top studio call in New York for decades. He went on the road with, he had recommended me for Woody Herman because it's all word of mouth too. Then he left Woody right away after I got there. Then when Chick put horns in one of his bands, Jim Pugh recommended me. So I connected with Chick Corea and ended up touring with him and staying with him over a period of years in terms of off and on when he would need or want a trumpet player of my type. And because he does different bands all through his year. Mm-hmm. And that took me to LA. I mean, I chose to move to New York or LA, and I wanted to go to LA, partially because of the weather.
It is nice there. Well,
I grew up in Montana and then all those years in Rochester, and I thought, you know what? I have a choice here. I'm driving to LA.
So you mentioned LA. Someone had a question regarding LA. So you recorded many movie soundtracks. Do you have a favorite?
Yes. Back to the Future was fun, really fun. Working with Lalo Schifrin, who's the guy that writes Mission Impossible and wrote all that kind of stuff, was fabulous. He wrote a couple of cop movies and a Clint Eastwood movie, and I kind of forget the titles of them. Mean Streets, I think, was one of them. I may be getting it mixed up with some of the titles you wouldn't know unless you dug it up on Netflix, you know. Mm-hmm. Firefox or something was one of Clint Eastwood's espionage movies. And I also really enjoyed the first Star Trek movie, although it was tense because there was tension in the room between producers and film score. But it was Jerry Goldsmith, who was iconic, one of the greats. If you looked at his Academy Awards list and nominations, you'd be surprised if you don't know his name, which I understand not knowing any film composers' names before John Williams, because it wasn't popularized then. You know, putting out soundtracks and things wasn't a thing. And that was a really fun one. And then playing on Prince's Under the Cherry Moon was interesting. A great pianist, jazz artist named Claire Fisher wrote orchestral arrangements that Prince wanted around his tunes, and we played those. And then what was the other one I was just thinking of? Maybe it'll pop into my head again. But I did work with John Williams too on the movie 1942. That was after Star Wars, but before any of the other big mega ones with Spielberg. And that's a comedy about the Japanese invading California, which they didn't do, right?
Yeah.
But the music was really cool and fun. Yeah.
Yeah. So you've experienced, recording, the movie soundtracks. So when you're recording your albums, your solo albums, how many days do you record those albums? Is it over a day or two, or is it weekends, or?
Different projects have been different. My not so recent one now, 5 years ago, Ritzville, I had a budget of a certain amount and I did everything in a week, including string overdubs and things like that. My very first album was produced and financed by the owner of Sunset Sound in Hollywood. His studio had done many things. Prince worked there, and a guy named Bob French, who was a hit artist, and a lot of heavyweights worked there. And it was a great studio, but it was pretty busy. And he wanted to give me kind of a carte blanche, make an album that you would make of music of your choice. And that's the Skyrocket record, or the white one if you have an LP, that silly front cover called Alan Vizzutti. And we worked around scheduling of what was in there. So that took months to fit in the holes of the schedule, sometimes late at night or whatever, and get the people to play. And the process was, excuse me, a little frog in my throat. I was a little naive, but also he had told me to take my time and do what I pretty much wanted. So I wasn't in a hurry because I wasn't paying for studio time. And then we were financing the individuals who played on it. But a lot of it was mixing and experimenting with different things I wanted to try as a trumpet player, because there's a lot of overdubbing of myself on that record in horn section style and stuff like that. Well, some, not a lot. So there's a real vast difference there. But in general, it's about the budget and getting it done fairly quickly.
Okay, that's cool. Let's see. Here's a good question. So most of your performing is memorized. How did you end up deciding to play solos memorized rather than reading sheet music?
That's accurate more recently, but not so much before. I don't play a piece from memory until I'm really solid on it. And repetition with an accompanist, which happens to live in my house, except for orchestra pieces, is very helpful. I like to play from memory because I play a really focused, and I wouldn't say more musical, but I slide into my musical head more easily. I do play a game with my mind, the self one, self two image of the inner game of music type thing. If you're familiar with that, there's self one is your confident person, and self two is the one back here telling you stuff to try to trip you up, which is really human. I do struggle a little bit with self two saying things like, you're going to forget the next phrase. Now, what do you do with that? And why does it come in your it's your own brain? Right. But that sort of thing can happen. Then you take present time and focus and stay in the present moment, and you'll be fine. But that takes a lot of relaxation. And sometimes if I've had a little fluff or something or not such a little fluff because of memory, I say to myself, why don't I just use music? The thing about music is distracting in not in recital so much, I don't think. It depends on the player. Because a lot of trumpet players go through all this histrionic nonsense and blowing out the water and clanging everything and playing the tuning note right in the pianist's face and, emptying all the slides, clang, clang, clang during the band or orchestra or piano tutti section where they're alone. And, when they play alone. And if you're kind of elegant about your presentation, the music doesn't have to be a problem. Doc never plays from memory. He just doesn't like it. He never liked it. But when I walk out in front of an orchestra, I prefer to have that kind of, I don't know, it's the classic decorum that all the violinists have to use and pianists mostly use before the iPad situation. You know, that could be another solution too. You don't have to play from memory, but you really dig into the music more if you don't rely on the notes. It's a really healthy mental process, but I don't like the feeling at all if I'm at all insecure.
Okay. Yeah, that's good stuff. I know me personally, I always got worried. The same thing with you, mine too, telling me that you're going to forget something. I'm like, yeah, that's a struggle.
Well, have you ever done I mean, haven't you been maybe recording at home or something or playing through an etude and you're going like, oh, I haven't missed a note yet. Bam, it's flat.
Yep.
Psychology.
Yeah. So, you know, over your career, you've had some amazing performances and experiences. You know, throughout your career, do you have a few favorite experiences musically or something that comes to mind?
Well, you know, in my life, there have been some really incredible experiences. I'll try to be reasonably succinct here. With the variation of music and performance and travel that I've done, you can see that that's a hard question to answer. So I'll pick out a couple that come to mind. And for instance, I've been to Japan 50 times. So lots of incredible things happen in a different culture like that.
Yeah.
One of the times there, Laura and I played at the opening of the concert hall in the Yamaha building, which is in the Ginza in Tokyo. This beautiful concert hall with a massive, incredible piano. And it was a big success, and that's a warm feeling. That was really nice. Flashback to my high school days. I played in Napoli, maybe 14 years old or something. Anyway, my parents were sitting in the front row, and my dad had tears in his eyes when it was over. So that's pretty heavy. Skip back to Japan. Laura and I played with a group of traveling European players and American players in this international trumpet and piano bass drums group that I wrote for. And we did quite a few tours in Japan and Europe. And we played at a home for severely physically disabled children. And you're talking about real people with real minds in a body that can do nothing. It can't even move. And it was an experience that brings tears to my eyes still, because you could reach, not all the kids were like that, but you could reach in another language, in another culture, a musical connection that was truly something to behold and to experience. When I did my 2 recitals at Eastman, the first one was kind of a monumental program, Albrechtsberger and a Vernon Reynolds piece and a French piece. They were all pretty long. And then a kind of a long jazz thing at the end, which we were allowed to do at that point, mixed recitals. And the 450, 500 seat recital hall was standing room only. When I got there, I was like, holy cow, because student recitals are going on all day there, you know?
Yeah. So
many recitals required. And it's a beautiful little wooden hall. And the crowd went nuts, and I encored with Carnival of Venice. And it became part of a tape that opened, like a cassette tape that I could share with people as I was trying to network a little bit, although we didn't use that term. Opened some doors for me later. That and some other material from that time period. That was really thrilling. It was just uplifting to know what you do is you feel the spark of performing and you feel like you can communicate, which I still feel really lucky in the regard that on stage, in that context, somehow the feedback is very consistently the audience get an emotional connection, not just technical stuff. They had fun. It was comfortable. You know, I've never heard anything like that kind of thought, or that I didn't know the trumpet could sound like that kind of deal. Those are really nice moments. There were a couple of times with Chick Corea that were wild. Once in a bullfighting arena in Spain, he can draw the crowds, you know, and we had a bigger band and he was playing My Spanish Heart for part of the concert. They went nuts. It almost got dangerous, like rock and roll style.
Yeah.
So there, you know, outdoor jazz festivals used to be a big deal. There was the Newport Jazz Festival, but that was sponsored by Newport Cigarettes, so you know where that went.
Mm-hmm.
There was Live Under the Sky in Japan, where when we would perform and when we would leave on the bus, the crowds would be around the bus. And this is jazz and fusion stuff. Fabulous. One other thing I'll throw out there was not me playing, but as a composer, Jeff Tyzik and I wrote a major 30-minute concerto that I still think is a really solid piece. I've never performed it because it's too difficult to get rehearsed in one rehearsal. Just called Concerto for Trumpet. And it's pretty neat. And still, we wrote it, and it got recorded by the London Symphony with Doc in 1990. And it still is really strong as far as, I don't think it's dated at all. In fact, it still sounds contemporary. Anyway, the London Symphony is pretty, they're just calloused because they work so hard. They don't get excited about much, right? So this is more about Doc, but it was an experience for me. Jeff and I are producing this album, full London Symphony. Doc has played this, and this is at a time period technologically between digital is coming on, recording-wise, but there's still a mixture of 2-inch tape. Now the 2-inch tape is digital, so it's just kind of a hybrid deal. But the reason I mention that is there's an editing situation. So Doc has to do really long sections and full movements, and the possibility of editing may not even be there. It turned out I could do a couple edits on this one machine I could get for 24 hours. That's another story. So this whole album he did, along with the Fischer Toll No. 2 concerto, same week, same 3 days actually, we did all this music rather quickly and with rehearsal. And you know Doc personally, and as do I, that he won't stop rehearsing. So his chops were what they were. He's played for 7.5, 8 hours. And he didn't like his first movement take. The first movement is 11 minutes long, not easy. And Doc said, if I can have 15 minutes overtime, because they're paying, you know, this producer guy's sweating because it's getting expensive. If he goes overtime, he says, sure, you can have 15 minutes. Because they do 15-minute increments in the symphonic in England, which are, whatever, it's different rules than we have here, maybe similar in that regard. So Doc has 15 minutes. It's an 11-minute piece. And we start. Now, the reason I mentioned the orchestra is a little calloused is they played their hearts out, and Doc ripped through this thing. And Jeff and I were there's this one spot he wants to fix, and we know what it is. It's real awkward. It goes up to a high D, and it's going, and it's real hard to make it clean. He played it, but it hadn't been what he wanted. He got through that. And Jeff and I are just, don't move. It's still 3 minutes to the end of the piece, you know? Don't even breathe. He can't see us or anything. We're in the class, behind the class and whatever. He gets through the last note, which is a high F sharp held. Wham! Silence. And that orchestra jumped to their feet, giving him a standing ovation. It was incredible, as he was.
Yeah. Wow, that's amazing stories. That's awesome. So let's see here. I want to make sure I don't miss some stuff here. Oh, here we go. Here's a good one. So you travel a lot for solo performances. Do you typically get to the city a day or two before? How many rehearsals do you typically have with these ensembles?
Usually one rehearsal, occasionally two. And I try to arrive, partially because of potential travel problems, I try to arrive the day before the event starts. So hopefully not in the midnight, but sometimes. I very seldom go a day early or earlier than that, unless it's international. I like to arrive in the morning or the afternoon and not have anything to do internationally, so that you can be a little lazy or warm up and then sleep for a while and stuff like that, and attempt to get on the time frame of the new time zone. So yeah, I really don't like to fly across thousands of miles and land 2 hours before rehearsal. It happens out of necessity, maybe when you put together a tour or because of a delay. So yeah, that's the smart thing to do. And I found it to be more relaxing. I'm not really losing that much time. Kind of another anecdote about that is if I have a day between, or let's say a day and a half between events somewhere in the United States, I'll fly home for a day or sleep one night and leave the next day again. Not always, but if I can't fill something in, I'll go ahead and come home for a day if it's a full day. So in other words, you arrive, sleep, have a whole full day and sleep again and then go.
Right.
Yeah. It's a little hard on the body, but it's nice to have connection at home as well and kind of reorient and whatever.
Right. And discussing traveling, with long haul flights, you've done them, you've done many, many, many.
Mhm.
How do you maintain lip strength and practice as sometimes, you're going to Australia or whatever, that's 24
Yeah.
hours later.
Yeah, really often it's 20 to 30 hours of travel because you have to connect going to a lot of these
Hmm.
places as opposed to straight. Now from Vancouver, Canada, Laura and I went to New Zealand. It was 17 hours to Auckland. That's really quick, historically. Amazing. Planes didn't used to do that when I first started doing that.
Yeah.
You'd have to stop in Hawaii or Singapore and add many more hours to go get gas, fuel. I will, as I mentioned before, when I first get in, I will play my horn. And maybe a 20-minute warm up, maybe more. That also forces you to get on a time zone. So you really want to go to sleep and you just say to yourself, okay, I'm going to get a little sandwich or something and then I'm going to play and then I'll rest. And when I say rest, it's just because you're so sleepy. It's not because you're physically weak necessarily.
Hmm.
And so my mantra, which is a stupid one, but in traveling, is stay warmed up at all times. And it kind of literally reminds me to just keep touching the horn.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good stuff. And then let's see, traveling. So what trumpet case do you use while flying? Or do you check your horns or do you carry on?
I always carry on. And I've looked and I had a custom case, which I won't go into, which held three. I generally travel with B flat, C and flugel. I mean, B flat, piccolo and flugel. I had a case that was on the soft side, but well designed to go in an overhead bin. Then it kind of wore out and couldn't be used anymore. There are some good cases out there. I looked at many. I bought a couple that I can't use. Again, dealing with overhead bins and considering the small jets and even the commuters that are still not jets, the de Havilland or whatever they are,
Yeah.
with very little carry-on space. I am using right now the Mike Vax ProTech. It's not expensive. The quality's been pretty good. The construction is pretty thick, hard sides, so that if you're in a situation, so far anyway, when you have to do the valet check where you set it on a cart outside when you get on the plane and pick it up there,
Mm-hmm.
I've had no problems with it. I've been using it for a year and a half now, I think. And it's cheap enough that if it breaks or whatever, you can get a new one.
Yeah.
It's not like bought a couple $600-700 ones, and they always are too big and don't have enough, even with the measurements, like incidentally, there are a lot more options than I'm talking about if you don't want one that rolls. I want a roller. A lot of hours carrying a backpack and things through large train stations and like in Japan, or all these walking situations in Europe. Now, okay, it's true that there are a lot of steps and there are a lot of cobblestones and things you have to deal with a roller. But big airports in the US, it kind of got to my back carrying something on crossing my shoulders. So I took this ProTech deal, which is basically advertised as a double. And I got a new, just one bendable but really firm divider. And I'm able to put flugel a little bit tilted in the back, but still upright. The piccolo slot in the middle, and nice protection with the B flat. It's a little tight, but the case is compact and quite functional, and it fits in almost all overheads.
Yeah,
So,
that's good.
I'd love to have a titanium specially made case that is designed for the overhead and has really stealthy wheels that barely stick out but work beautifully,
Yeah.
instead of that trolley junk.
Yeah, it's still, even when we travel and stuff internationally with trumpets and stuff, I carry everything on. I'm too worried about checking things, even though we have like these really nice guard, like armored
Yeah.
I don't want to
In
show up somewhere and the bell's missing.
Oh gosh. Yeah, and people are spend a lot of money on their horns and love them.
Yeah.
Yes. In general, the flight attendant people and they try to be helpful. In general, you're going to run across one that's just had a bad day, but basically they try to be helpful.
Yeah. So we have a question from a seasoned player. So he says, as I aged, I found my practice habits needed to adapt. How have you maintained such a high level of performance for so long?
I have no idea.
Okay.
I think what happens is you definitely change. Certain things are not as easy, but certain things are easier. And I think part of that comes from repetition, a little bit more wisdom, perhaps, a little less ego. And then in some cases, and this is a bit facetious, but has an element of truth, is I don't even care.
Yeah.
In terms of, okay, I can't play double high C like that guy next to me, who's some kind of an amazing athletic horse, high note pounder, you know. I'm fine with that. So yeah, physically, try to think more musically and not quite so much physically on the trumpet, because we have definitely overdone it. Since we started playing as a kid, we've been directed toward Schlossberg and lip slurs and repetition, and you know that stuff well. Now, if your third finger is a little not as active or as easy as it used to be or something like that, yeah, definitely you can work on that and do a few flexibility things that are specific toward a changing need. But you can actually play better and better. And Doc Severinsen's been a great example of playing so beautifully well into his 80s and beyond. You know, this is ridiculous. But big changes in his probably ease of performance.
Yeah, that's good stuff. Let's see. Oh, we have a question from Vince DiMartino.
Who's
that? It's some guy, lives in Danville. He's fine.
But
he asks, talk a little more about your quick warm up and the practice mute. So about when you're playing the practice mute, what specifically do you play on? Like, what do you excerpts?
Yes. I don't play it totally very differently from playing it open in terms of the content. Volume, yes, I just sort of play mezzo forte, and I lean on the resistance some to the point of not overblowing, but feeling that, which I like anyway. But I play mostly some smooth arpeggiated things and on and off the lip, longer notes. More than that, though, I play mixed articulations probably the most. And then I'll do a set of or a partial set of the technical type studies like Clark 2 or Vizzutti. Similar studies. That's basically it. And then what I'm doing after that, if I keep playing, that's the warm-up component, say 15, 20 minutes. But I do like to play I forget some of the numbers of the Clark because I haven't literally pulled out the book for years. I just play it from memory. But the one that goes da 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 da, is that number 4?
4 or 5. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I do. I use that one a lot, but I rest too if I feel like it's getting a little stuffier. I'm always careful not to overblow the mute, because that just creates kind of puffiness and stiffness that you don't need.
Yeah.
And then the only other that's I'm beyond the warm up now, but the other thing that I will be going over is probably the literature I'm going to play, but more or less for memorization and to brush up on a couple of sections that I need to just really focus on when I'm playing the piece. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I also use the mute. I also use the mute without the electronics because I just am not in the habit of carrying them with the batteries and the little extra gear and stuff. But when you put headphones on or earbuds in with that mute, you know, you can hear through your bones. And when you balance it volume-wise, you can do play along. So if I'm practicing a concerto with the recording of somebody else for memorization, which I do that's helpful. Or if I'm doing just on a day off or for fun or on a jazz situation, brushing up on some changes or a tune with the iReal Pro, you can do that easily with earbuds and silent brass and no electronic connection. You got to be careful not to overblow it, to take some rest though, because that's that phenomenon with improvising, right? Oh, geez, why am I stiff? Oh, geez, I haven't taken my horn down for 25 minutes.
Yeah.
Of course, that Vince doesn't have to worry about that. He never gets tired.
So your composition, 9 Black Riders, do you have an official recording of that? Because I know a lot of people, they find the nice recording on YouTube, but is there an official recording of it?
No, I've never done one. Never did.
Okay.
I'd like to. Maybe now's the opportunity. Now that it's more logical than, people talk about albums and release dates and all that. What are they talking about? There are no CDs, and I mean, album, yeah, okay. You can buy an album on iTunes or one tune. So now, my point is, you can do one piece and release it if you want.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're getting any action, but that's one of the components of the new style that's kind of nice.
Yeah.
I say new style meaning the lack of LPs or CDs.
Right. So we do have a few mouthpiece questions. One of them is, how did you go about with the research and development of designing your own signature mouthpiece with Peter and Pick a Brass?
Okay. The preface to that I'm keeping really short is at Eastman School, when I went on the road with Woody, I realized I had to go a little I wanted to go a little smaller for ease of playing lead trumpet. By ease, I mean making it through without dying.
Mm-hmm.
That took me in a direction which involved a diameter that fits me. And I've always stuck with the basic diameter that I managed to develop then. That was through, through Schilke, because I was the only mouthpiece maker anywhere. It wasn't even near, but I could deal with Scott Laskett in Chicago, where I was in New York, Rochester. I could deal with him through mail, basically. So anyway, I came up with a mouthpiece I played on the road. Now, from that mouthpiece, I would have mouthpieces copied wherever I was. Just have them copy it. And sometimes it was more easy to play and better. Sometimes it was junk. I just went through that. I didn't try to come up with any knowledge about anything. Okay, so that led me to the Vince DiMartino introducing me to Peter Pickett and to having him copy my mouthpiece, which is what I did again. I had been playing a Yamaha mouthpiece for, I don't know, 20 years maybe. Not that much of a mouthpiece freak, you know. And their work was great. I always had my stuff at that time done in Japan. They didn't have Yamaha ateliers in the US at that time. And I like the mouthpiece. In fact, if I played the Yamaha Alan Vizzutti mouthpiece now, I could do fine. But when Peter copied it, something was different. And I always projected, because I have no knowledge of the technical side, that it had to do with subtle design differences, weight, backbore tools are different, shapes are probably a little different. The rim and cup are copied, but even the opening to the throat could be different. You know, I didn't study that and compare the two. I just play them. Mm-hmm. And Vince was there. Vince DiMartino was there. And I played Peter's first or second try on that computer lathe. It doesn't matter. And seems like it was the first try, because I don't remember asking for anything. And if I did, it was musical. Like, could it be a little this color or a little more open above high C? And which was one of the things I was looking for, a little more open when you put some energy into above high C. And he came up with this mouthpiece, and that was it. That was February 15th, some years ago, I remember. And I put the other mouthpiece in my case, and I played that mouthpiece going forward from there. And I haven't changed a thing since. The only thing I've done with you guys right is to come up with a C trumpet and cornet and piccolo. And I talked to Peter musically. I didn't talk about numbers or design, or he would say, did you know this backbore was this or that? I say, no, I don't really care. I like the way it plays, because I just don't know anything, right? So it was that easy for me, and I started recommending him to people. And I realized sometimes you have different personalities, like trying to please Doc Severinsen on a mouthpiece. Well, the nice thing is he'll have you make his mouthpieces, and there'll probably be 50, 60, 70 of them before he's finished. But he still won't be satisfied. He won't be mean about it. He'll be good about it, and he'll enjoy it, but he won't quite be satisfied. Same with trumpet design for him. So for me, though, I'll play sometimes, and maybe at a concert with a high school or college jazz ensemble, and they'll be asking me at the clinic, wow, how did you do this or that? And I'll say, pull up a magic mouthpiece. It's kind of fun. There are compromises, of course. And actually, I have an interesting mouthpiece anecdote. You got time? Mm-hmm. Okay, so you guys made me a mouthpiece for C trumpet. I'm very close to satisfied with it. I've played the Tomasi on it, and I've played it in orchestra and things. In other words, going for the correct sound for the job on a beautiful New York Yamaha New York model C trumpet. And the reason I sense almost there, because I want to work with you a little bit more on a couple aspects of that one eventually, knowing that don't play C trumpet super often. Actually, Peter did something about a year ago for me, which was just had to do with one of the feelings I had about it. And I used that mouthpiece recently playing the Tomasi a couple of nights. So this is before the Tomasi, which doesn't matter anyway. I'm sitting in my practice area and I'm playing the C and the B flat. And I'll use the C trumpet mouthpiece on my B flat sometimes to play jazz, more bebop style, just because it takes the edge off and has a little more round sound naturally, which you'd want to go for.
Yeah.
Well, what does this sound like on piccolo? It's deeper, very slightly, but it's deeper than my B flat. Not even a quarter size in the Bach world. In other words, point of reference. Mm-hmm. I put it on my piccolo, and the high notes were just as easy, or maybe easier than the piccolo mouthpiece I had. And the sound went, as far as depth of harmonic structure, from that day, I've been using my C trumpet mouthpiece, which is bigger than my B flat mouthpiece, on piccolo ever since. I don't know why it works, but I encourage you to experiment, and you'll learn a lot, even if you don't end up, having perfect results right away. And you guys at Pickett are fabulous for that. Listening to musical thought, because you all play, for one thing, to help design as opposed to technical stuff.
Right. I
was just really surprised that I think part of the situation is that I can play to a certain degree acceptably round and big on my smaller mouthpiece and down low for my needs. But it's not an orchestral sound. But as a concert soloist playing the more contemporary literature, I do stick a larger mouthpiece on to play Hummel, which is about the only classical piece I play on B flat, except for recital pieces. And I'll mix that up on a recital, which mouthpiece I use of those two.
Yeah.
But those are the only two larger mouthpieces, meaning trumpet shank mouthpieces that I use at all. Piccolo C one, and the B flat one. I don't have other mouthpieces. Vince DiMartino is an artist at playing really extreme differences for the certain piece of music. He'll even almost use a flugel mouthpiece type thing on trumpet to play. I remember he used to play this Floor Pater's second movement, real pretty with organ, on this huge mouthpiece, and just beautiful. I get on there and I miss notes though, or waft them out. Not quite as adaptable. The next questions are $1 each.
Okay, let me post that. Let's see. So I have my high school trumpet students playing on all Pickett 5Cs and 3Cs. At what time and age would you have them go to larger sizes, or would you not have them go to larger sizes?
I wouldn't go to larger sizes for any particular reason unless they sounded way too bright and edgy on what they're playing. I might go smaller. I guess the bottom line is experiment. And I always advocate in teaching clinics and things about, you got to use sanitation as much as possible and be as careful as possible, even long before this pandemic situation. But in terms of being wise about it, try everybody's mouthpieces in your trumpet section or anything you're interested in. You'll learn so much about sound and how it feels on your face and what works or what feels like it might be the right direction, what not. In general, going through school, high school and college, you're going to have to be really flexible in terms of style and sound. You're going to run from jazz ensemble across the hall to orchestra, across the hall to brass quintet, and be in situations for your school situation where you need to be producing a sound that's appropriate for each genre. Now, that's not to say jazz ensemble in high school and concert band in high school. You have to have a compromise situation there, probably. You don't have to have 5 mouthpieces, don't get me wrong. But experimenting is wonderful. And that's, again, where somebody like Peter and your company comes in. You can provide, I think, examples and sets of examples that people can try so that they can learn what direction might help them a little bit. I fully believe that a person that's been playing more than a few months can be helped by a mouthpiece. I do keep in mind that I hear, for instance, I worked, for instance, recently with a 13-year-old Croatian kid playing Cascades and the Brandt, been playing 3 years. You can hear from his sound, he has a pretty big mouthpiece. He's killing it. Sounds fantastic. Skipping those big intervals and everything. But I did know and learn, and basically we worked on some things, but I didn't put focus on it. His range cuts off at like B natural and C just not confident. I think that's a mouthpiece thing. The kid is skilled. His sound is beautiful. And I think there's a way to go that helps him produce more energy when he needs it without sacrificing a thing.
Yeah.
I mentioned my mouthpieces before were very slightly different, not even a quarter size. Keep that in mind. Because a lot of the tendency of the kids, when you say, get a shallower mouthpiece, they go get a 6A4A from Schilke that Bill Chase used to use, the only person in the world can make it sound like anything. Or they go get a Vacchiano or Bud Herseth, toilet bowl size mouthpiece that they can make soup in when they're done practicing. They go so extreme because they take it to heart, like, oh, I have to make a big difference. A very small difference can make a big sound and feeling difference. I would keep that in mind. So what does that mean for your students though, right? Specifically, it's a bit of an experimentation, and then the knowledge that as a more older player, if you are a player, teacher, of some of the subtle differences that might help. Because I haven't even talked about, nor do I know a lot about backbores and throats. Although I do know a large backbore in general works really great on a piccolo trumpet for sound quality. Mm-hmm. And then the teacher who is a non-trumpet player teaching trumpet players, I would, for something this specific, I would take my advice. I would consider the advice I've offered, but I also get some help from a trumpet player.
Oh, here's one on piccolo trumpet. Do you notice a difference between if you play a trumpet shank mouthpiece or cornet shank mouthpiece? Is there a big difference in your mind, or do you have any thoughts on that?
I don't really know because I haven't played a cornet shank mouthpiece for many years. I had one when I at one time owned a Schilke many decades ago, actually, the P54 touch style horn that at that time only took cornet shank. And the Yamaha that I play, the 9830, I think it is, comes with both shanks now. Yeah. I mean, 4 shanks for A and B flat. So you have your choice. I don't really know what the cornet one feels like or sounds like comparatively.
Okay, I think that's about it. Well, Alan, I really appreciate your time, and it's good to know you're healthy and everything's good. And I just want to thank you for all your time and what you do for us.
Thank you for having me, and good luck to all of you, and Peter and Eric. I appreciate it very much. It was really fun. And I want to leave you with one of my best low notes, okay?
Okay.
It's really a good one. I never miss. Although the attack was a little sucky.
That's all right. Well, that's good. Well, Alan, I appreciate it, and stay safe.
Bye. You too.
Bye.